Hello everybody, so how we doing today? Are you ready? Are you ready? Anyway, from Ruptly. Extreme heat dominates headlines, but roller coaster weather should worry us most. What's going on? Global warming! As parts of Europe enter a second heat wave this summer and battles wildfires to the drumbeat of weather warnings and climate change alarm, other parts of the world look on in envy as they shiver in their summer shorts. Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands have just beaten an all-time heat record. The UK is set to do the same. France did it last month, but could come close again this week. Portugal has just brought on wildfire under control, and warns of a very high risk of more, as are Spain and Italy. It wasn't so long ago, I remember there were some California wildfires here in the U.S. I did some reports on that back in the day before I started tackling global politics. It was largely due to just bad wildlife. It was bad due to just bad wildlife management. Because the environmentalists wouldn't let them do proper forest management because it involved slash and burn. Now, obviously, this is going to be very different scenario. People are going to take this as evidence of global warming, but do keep in mind that if you look at the fossil record, you'll note that the Earth goes through a heat cycle. It starts cold, gets hot, gets cold, and gets hot again. It shows up in the fossil record. Yeah, if you only follow meteorological data only, of course you're going to think global warming is a thing. Anyway, but earlier in July, Germany and the Netherlands hit a record low nighttime temperature of under -1 degrees Celsius, and Switzerland was a few degrees cooler than its summer averages. All the while, Moscow is getting soaked with rain in July that's set to become the coldest in over 40 years. We ask climate weather experts what's going on. Global warming or climate change? There's no denying the planet, broadly speaking, is heating up. This year saw the warmest observed spring in the northern hemisphere. June was the warmest on record worldwide. Some areas are becoming warmer at a faster rate than others, including those closer to the poles, says Dmitry Kiktyev, acting director of Rosgidromet, Russia's state weather service. Russia is also heating up faster than the global average in the last 40 years. 2.5 times faster, in fact. It has been gaining almost half a degree every decade since the late 1970s, according to Rosgidromet's 2018 climate report. Why then are Muscovites grudgingly shuffling into their autumn coats in July, which is supposed to be the hottest month of the year in these parts? July 2019 has been steadily proceeding at 2 degrees below average, and it's going to be even worse next week when an Antarctic blast is predicted to take thermometers down to below 15 degrees Celsius. This is how the fossil record experts say that temperature changes occur. First, things get really cold, then things get really hot. They stay hot for a while, and they cool down again, rinse, repeat. It shows up in the fossil record. Going by meteorological data purely limits your perspective to one thing. It's a recipe for ignorance. Even scientists can make mistakes, folks. They are human beings, after all. But let's continue. The number of observed weather extremes and anomalies increases, but it's not necessarily a direct correlation with getting warmer. There is data over the past decade which shows the number and strength of weather extremes is increasing in many areas of the globe. The weather is getting more twitchy, though not everywhere, Kiktyev says. Observed is the key word here, experts believe. Rains, downpour, storms, it was all there 100 years ago too. On the other hand, the latest statistics show that the number and frequency of dangerous phenomena has increased. Whether that's because of climate change or because there has been more monitoring, it's not entirely clear, says Anatoly Tsingenkov, deputy head of Roskildemat's Situation Center, obviously 100 years ago, where their observation networks were very different now, it was less dense. There were no satellites nowadays. The monitoring is more detailed. Man-made or natural? How much of this global warming is of our own doing is debatable. Nobody really knows the reason. There are two theories. The two foremost theories are the greenhouse effect and the shifting of the Earth's axis relative to the Sun. Both are viable, says Sigankov. I already said my piece on that. Earth goes through cycles, heating up and cooling down over centuries. Examples include the medieval warm period followed by the Little Ice Age of the late Middle Ages. What we are going through now could essentially be another such swing, says Yevgeny Tishkovets, the chief specialist at the Phobos Weather Center. Finally, someone talks some sense! The main factor behind climate change on Earth is the changes in solar activity. As a rule, it happens every 200 years, give or take, says Tishkovets. Despite all of the apocalyptic worst-case scenarios flashing from news headlines, it's nigh impossible to accurately predict climate in the long term. Such predictions are based on climate models of which there are plenty, and advisory bodies get to pick and choose which one to use. Well, finally someone talks sense here. It's just a heat cycle. It's not man-made, although possibly man-influenced. Global warming is almost akin to a mass hysteria. It's human nature to want to seek out the worst-case scenario in order to prepare for it. But sometimes the worst-case scenario just isn't real. Alright? We go through heat cycles. The Earth gets cold, then it gets hot, then it gets cold again. It happens. We're changing our axial position. Hell, do you remember that time when the magnetic poles changed and for a little while compasses stopped working? Yeah. I was a kid in school when that happened. I remember it as clear as day. It was all over the news under the science category. It's just all part of the Earth's natural cycle, and we're panicking because we're a bunch of stupid naked monkeys, relatively hairless monkeys, living on top of a rock, hurtling through space. You know, unless you happen to be a flat earther. The human impact in particular has been exaggerated and vastly politicized, Tishkovets believes. He named the 2009 ClimateGate scandal as a case in point. There have been scandals. Remember the leaked emails of British climatologists when they manipulated climate data? A lot of people are simply fulfilling an order. We need to overheat the topic. Here's the money. Go. Manipulation is made easier by the sheer variety of climate projection models, and the end results is practically impossible to contest, he believes, because how can you even verify a 50-year weather forecast? You can't. A lot of the time that this whole global warming myth is highly unscientific. It's amazing. And people always fall into that appeal to authority fallacy. Oh, they're scientists. They know better. They know what they're doing. They're also human beings and capable of making mistakes. Is every summer going to be like this now? Despite all the tools at our disposal, we can only really trust a forecast for the next week. A 10-day one at most. Experts agree anything more far-reaching than this is subject to myriad mutable factors, which can undermine the most accurate seeming prognosis on a whim. It's not all that straightforward. There's no certainty. The next year will be warmer than this one. There are peaks and valleys. There are so-called long-term modes of atmospheric variability, which are like swings that can last decades. They can partially offset each other, or they can add up. And then we get an extreme winter or summer, Kityov says. We all see that alarming graphs with the temperature curves crawling up degree by degree over the recent decades, but reliable weather and climate monitoring only goes back 140 years or so, a speck in time compared to planetary history. And in the end, we might end up having to just crumple those graphs and throw them in the bin, says Tishkovets. Part of the reason why people from the liberal school of politics, particularly on the far left, want so badly to believe in global warming, and it is such an issue for them, and why they would want to believe in it, is really because they're prone to groupthink. Instead of thinking for the group, they think with the group. They operate based largely on opinion, on shared opinion, that is. And so there's not much independent thought within the left. So when a narrative becomes popular, everyone suddenly believes in it. They're like lemmings. That has a lot to do with it. And people are sold because they fall into the appeal to authority fallacy. Believe me, climate experts have a lot of money to make. They get government grants. They get all sorts of benefits and profit and artificial profit incentives. Not to mention, environmentally friendly energy companies, like, the people that make, like, solar power generated and so forth, also stand to make a lot of money from this almost, dare I say, Keynesian approach of creating artificial profit incentive which doesn't last. And ultimately, admittedly, yes, global warming is fake. However, air pollution is a problem. Excuse me. And many methods of generating power create air pollution. I mean, no one can dismiss Beijing. I mean, God forbid if you have asthma in Beijing. Having to live in Beijing with asthma is basically a death sentence. I mean, let's be honest here. It's pretty much a death sentence. Still, I mean, Europe is heating up, so, I mean, go through your heat cycle, survive, dress the right way, eat the right way, find an appropriate shelter. You'll make it. You'll live. Don't make such a big deal out of it. Anyway.